This video is about the crazy Melbourne weather because yesterday was 38 degrees and today is 14. Oh, I can't take it anymore. Hi everyone, this is Andrea Joshua from the Black Syndicate Collective, and today we are going to talk about storytelling for your business. I've decided to do a series of videos about storytelling for your business because my background is actually in advertising, but my passion is filmmaking, and this is what I'm trying to pursue in my free time. And the first rule of filmmaking is having a good story. There is no movie without a good story. I mean, you can make a movie without a good story, but the movie is gonna end up being shit. And when something's not good, it doesn't make any money. Right? And I think the same goes for your business. So I see the importance of storytelling for business, and I decided to create this series to talk a bit more about that. We've been using storytelling for thousands of years. In the prehistoric time, storytelling was a way to communicate to your tribe or to your loved ones and pass on some important message. For example, instead of telling people, don't go in the forest because you are gonna be killed by a tiger, they created a story about these little kids who didn't listen to his parents and end up playing in the forest, running and playing in the forest, and he never came back. Why? Because he got eaten by a tiger. And a story like that can resonate way more with kids because they project themselves into it, and that's why it was easier to transfer knowledge between people. You can see how storytelling was really important for survival, and it hasn't really changed. Like, we evolved technologically, but it hasn't really changed the way that we perceive storytelling. We can use the same storytelling mechanism for our business. This structure that we are going to learn in the next couple of videos is basically a compressed version of the hero's journey, which is the structure that they use in basically every movie you ever watched or every book you ever read. But this particular way that I'm going to talk you through comes from Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller, which is this book here. I highly suggest you read this book. It's really well written. It's really simple, really straightforward, and it can really teach you how to structure your copy or your next marketing piece for your business. What I'm doing is basically putting to video with example this book. Also, this book is nothing new. I think that the hero's journey, the first time that we see the hero's journey into a text is the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is 4,000, 5,000 years ago, from ancient Sumerian. So it's a really, really old way to structure stories. So we are going to start by breaking down the first important part of of storytelling. When we're trying to create a piece of marketing copy or a story for whatever that is, the first important element is the character, the protagonist of the story. Now, there is a tendency to think for businesses and for businesses or for entrepreneurs that the character or the protagonist of the story is ourselves or our business. And there's nothing further than the truth. No one wants to sit down and read a marketing piece about how cool that brand is. What they want to know is what they can get out of you. Right? The protagonist of your story is your customer, because you and your business are in service of others. You are not the hero of your own story. The customer is the hero of your story. So when we define who our protagonist is, which most of the time is your ideal customer, is your niche, then we need to define what they want. So every time that you watch a movie, in the first 10 minutes you understand that there is a protagonist and there is something that they want, right? And then there are stuff in the middle that is going to happen that at least you know what they want. How do we define what they want? The best way to define what they want and to create a question for them is to define what you help them with. A really simple formula that I've learned to use is I help this niche to solve this problem, right? So for example, I help female entrepreneurs creating outstanding video content to raise their brand to a premium level. Now that's a really basic on the news definition, but if to start with, it's a good example of what you help people with. So when you define in that way what you do, me as your ideal customer, when I read that sentence, I'm like, oh, this person might really help me. So what's happening there is that you are creating a gap, right? And you're creating a gap from point A to point B. And the ideal customer is asking himself, is this brand actually going to help me? So that creates a question in their mind that keeps them engaged with your story, and they want to find out more because now they have this question inside of them that they want to answer. For example, think about a really famous piece of music or poetry that you really like. Just take, for example, the Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. If you sing the song in your head that goes, Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, how I wonder what you... Can you feel the gap there? Like, there should have been R, but I haven't said the R, so you felt that gap. Your brain goes, I want closure. Which is the same thing that your brain goes through when they're reading your sentence about what you do, and they're creating that question in their head. Is this brand, is this business, is this person going to help me solve my problem? They want to get the end of that story because they want to understand if you can actually help them solve their problem. The bigger the problem that you solve, the more what you do relate to, in a way, relate to our survival. You know, you can help me conserve more money, save more time, build a better social network, be respected, be loved. The more it relates to this kind of survival mechanism that are still in our brains, the bigger this gap is going to be. If the customer feels this gap, does that mean that they probably have a problem or a challenge that they're going through? And our second point for creating a great story is defining the problem. Every story, every movie, every book has a villain, right? Sometimes it might be a physical person, it might be a threat, or sometimes it might just be our inner demons. But anyway, there is a villain present. Now you need to find the villain of your story. Let me give you a couple of examples. If you are a financial advisor that helps people with money, the villain for your customer might be high taxes, right? So it's not a physical person, but it's something that they can relate to. It's almost physical. High taxes come in the form of ATO mail in your mailbox. So there is a concrete, tangible way to personify this villain. If you're a business coach, the villain can be the mortgage that they have to pay, or bankruptcy, something that they want to stay clear of. So you need to find your own villain, and it needs to be defined. A villain can't be an emotion, like it can't be just frustration, because frustration is difficult for us to grasp on a tangible sense. It has to be something that people can personify. For example, for me, because I help female entrepreneurs create incredible content that can position themselves in the marketplace on a different level than their competition, my villain is the 20-something marketing guru that attended one seminar and now they are everywhere on social media. Why is the villain, in my case, someone like that? Because I usually work with women that are way in the business, so they are between 35, 45 age range, and they have a huge experience, they have a huge background, and their experience sometimes doesn't get recognized. I personify this problem that they have into a 20-year something that is trying to be a marketing guru. My villain is specific to my niche, then you need to find your villain for yours. Once you find your villain, you need to realize that there are 3 levels of problem that your niche is going through. The 3 problems are external problems, internal problems, and philosophical problems. The easiest one, of course, is the external problem. External problems are probably the easiest one to get your head around it, because it's what your business actually does. So if you're a business coach, you help people make more money. If you're a financial advisor, you help people to manage their money. If you are a fitness coach, you help them getting a six-pack or whatever it's going to be. So it's pretty straightforward. But it's the surface of the problem that your customer have, right? Second, which are probably the most important, is the internal problems. Companies sell solution for external problems, but customer buy solution for internal problems. Because, we as humans, we buy emotionally and then we rationalize after. When a customer comes to you and they want to buy business coaching, what they think they need is to make $1 million, for example, or to make more money. But if it is that they're buying a solution for internal problems, for example, they want to be the provider for their family, they want to put their kids through school, they want to prove their mom and daddy wrong, whatever it is, there is an internal problem they're looking the solution to. Most of the time, some people don't really realize that what they're buying is because of the internal problems. So when we create a marketing communication around that, when we can show them that we can also help them to solve their internal problems, that helps to increase the value around our product or service. So it's a fundamental part for you to find out what the internal problems of your customer are, so you can provide a solution with your service and with your product. And then number 3, we have the philosophical problems. This is a bit more difficult to get your head around it, but just think about this. When you buy an Apple computer, for example, you're not just buying a laptop, right? You don't just buy a solution to the fact that you want to be a filmmaker or a graphic designer, or you want to be a creative person. You buy into the narrative of creativity that can change the world. You feel like as a creative person, you can have an impact on the world, and that's why you buy Apple Computer, because that's how they position themselves. Apple Computer is for the creatives. Apple Computers are for the people who think differently. If you can find philosophical problems that your product or your business solve, then you're increasing your value even more on the eyes of your customer. For example, if you're selling business coaching, you're not just selling, making money or become the provider that you want to be. You're also selling this idea that entrepreneurs needs to change the world. They need to be able to get the financial resources to impact as many people as possible. That's a beautiful narrative for someone that's trying to buy your product or service, because that's probably how they feel inside as well. Making your customer feel like they're part of a larger narrative, it's a big selling point for your business. To give you an example, if I have to go through all of this for me is this, right? So the external problem is I sell high quality, cinematic videos for entrepreneurs, especially women. The internal problem that I solve is that these women have worked a huge part of their life building their business, and they are not having the recognition that they deserve. And I help them with that. I help them by creating, by solving the external problem, creating high quality video that position themselves on in a different way in their marketplace on a premium level, and so they can feel like they are at the level that they deserve to be. The philosophical problem that I feel I'm solving for these women is that every woman in business has the ability to change the world, and they should. And that's why I'm there to help them to spread that message. Amazing. So for recap this first video about storytelling, so we talk about your protagonist, the protagonist of your story, which is your customer, and the way that we can create a story gap so that they can feel engaged and they want to know more about your business. How do we do that? By defining what our business does. By using the formula, I help this niche by solving this problem. Once you get that one down, then you can create that story gap for your customer. In the second part of the video, we'll learn that every protagonist always have a problem. The problem starts with the villain that can help us personify the problems that they're going through, and then we have 3 sets of problems: external problem, internal problem, and philosophical problem. External problem are the easiest one, is what you actually do as a business. Internal problem is what they are actually trying to solve emotionally within themselves. And philosophical problem is making your customer part of a larger narrative. I hope that this video helped you kind of have an idea of how to start your story on your next marketing copy. And in the next video, we are going to talk about how to position yourself as a business and how to give to your customer a plan that they can follow. Thank you so much, and I will see you in the next video.